Okay, so it happened again this week. I'm loving this actually. It happens almost every week now, where there's something that comes up that I hear about, that I read about, or just like something in my daily life that really reminds me and is like right in alignment with why I started Bring Connection back, and like all the stuff that I think is great about what we're doing, or all the stuff that I think is valuable, the value that I wanted to like make sure everybody got to experience. I always am finding these somethings that come up that really encapsulate that, and I love it. So I'm sharing, of course, because I also think it's really awesome to hit it from all angles. It's like drives the point home, or like really fleshes it out. To kind of hear as it comes up, like all these different ways, like, yeah, it applies to that too. Yeah, so here I am sharing. This time it was something that Jordan Harbinger said. I think he wrote an article about this. It was Action Ends Suffering. But I actually heard him talking about this in a podcast and loved it. He went into detail on it. And right away, like when you hear the statement, action ends suffering, I think the first way that we think of this is like, helping others, like outside of yourself. If there's suffering going on in the world, like take action and help another, reach out your hand. And that is totally true. That can be absolutely a way that this statement makes sense. Action and taking action can end the suffering of others. But he was speaking about it in a yourself suffering way. And of course he was speaking about it in other ways too. He was aware that there was, all these other ways that it was true, but the beauty was kind of in this, like ending your own suffering, because that's where we struggle a lot. It's like we have suffering, or we find ourselves in a state of suffering and we get so bogged down in it and we don't know what to do. And ending our own suffering, action, and getting into action, taking some action is the way to end your own suffering as well. And I've heard this in a lot of different forms, before, but this was just like short and neat and simple. And it's the thing that happened to come up this week. And in it is so much of what I started Bring Connection back for. Action, just action, taking action and trying things really, to me, created more change and got things moving and got you out of any element of suffering. I mean, the word suffering is heavy, and absolutely somebody might be in a state of suffering and that's why they want more connection. They want to bring connection back because they are really in a deeply suffering place, or, they have no playfulness, or they're in disrepair with their partner or their kids, and there's like really a heavy problem going on and there is true suffering happening. But true suffering, I said the word true suffering, or I said the phrase true suffering, and I realized right away, like, no, that's the very point that I'm trying to make here. All suffering, even small suffering, is still true suffering. I mean, it's still something there. So even if it was something small, like, I'm not suffering, but sure, I could use some extra playfulness. There is still like a little element in there, just like you're without a little bit of that extra playfulness that you could have. So there's like some small element of what we could call suffering, some teeny little suffering or lack of flow or something going on. So even if, you don't think of yourself as like in a place of suffering right now, but, playing more or having some more connection or doing these things for deepening your connection with yourself and others still sounds good. I mean, that makes sense too. It's these little ways that action just helps anyway. It alleviates, it gets flow going, and that's why action ends suffering. So the reason that it kind of like, again, it just sort of reinforces that, like, okay, when you get in there and experiment, and when you get in there and try something and get into the doing part, things move, you're experiencing, you are alive. Here comes a loud plane. Just wait until that passes. But anyway, so yeah, you're actually doing and being, and all of a sudden, instead of not feeling alive, which is very much what suffering is like, you feel limited, stagnated, all of a sudden, you are just flowing, you're doing, you're acting, you know that you're alive because you're experiencing and you are doing. And that, whether that makes sense to you or not, I've tried over and over to explain that when I'm kind of saying what's so wonderful about bring connection back. And I do always wonder, like, does that make sense to people like it does to me? I mean, because when I started this, this was totally based in how powerful I felt trying things and playing and doing and experimenting and giving yourself little challenges was to me. It was really powerful in my life, to just like, okay, I keep longing for this one thing. Like, what can I do to like get myself, make something change? I'll give myself a challenge. I'll make this happen. But also, as I've said before, this kind of came about in a slow process. Of course, I'm like an person that loves that introspective, like toying with things, tinkering with things in there, but not just thinking about it, but then taking it and really doing it was like, whoa, okay, I'm actually, trying something, and this is really making everything come together in such a different way than spending hours thinking about it or writing down journals about it or whatever. But this was also something I was able to observe. I was an aerial teacher, still am actually, for 20 years, just teaching people to do this highly skilled, thing that they've never tried with their bodies, going upside down and climbing and doing all these things that most of us have not tried before or that are not like skilled at. And so it was like we were really doing some difficult new neural connections with our body, and we were trying new things. And of course I saw that their emotions were coming forward too, and their inner stuff was happening because we were working on outer stuff. Okay, so that was kind of reinforcing that, like, hey, really doing things and getting your body moving also has these like inner effects too, in subtle ways, and not just subtle ways that don't require so much effort and so much drudgery, but also in important ways that like make that final snap and that final connection and that final link like get into place. So I was observing that and doing that with them, but also, I was seeing the truth in the physical way, how, action was ending suffering there too. It was like them trying these things and like doing, of course, if you're like trying to get a particular physical skill, trying that physical skill is important. That makes sense. But it wasn't about just visualizing it. I know some athletes use visualization. It is important, but it was also about trying things that weren't the exact thing that they were trying to get. If they were trying this particular skill and just repeat trying that over and over, that wasn't as effective as like switching it up, playing a little game with it, putting some limitations on it, putting a spin on it, trying some other exercise that had some similar qualities but wasn't quite the same because it was limited, this, or this, or like making them do the opposite. We're wanting them to go upside down. Okay, don't go upside down in this one. Like, try your hardest, make sure you don't, or, whatever. And see how that goes, like flipping it and trying the inverse. And when I was realizing, like, from a physical standpoint, like, you see, this is like really shifting their suffering, so to speak. And again, I'm using the term loosely, like this, can't get it. I can't get it. I can't get it. Or I want it to change, or I'm trying to grow in this area. I need to like break past my own limitation, my own barrier. I want to expand more here. And can't do it. And then trying these crazy little twists on it, especially because they were like experimental. It was like, okay, I'm trying something new. I'm breaking it up and changing it up and experiencing still, doing still, not just thinking about it, not just hammering away at the same old task, then things started to really come together. So for all these reasons, I was like, this is so fun. It yields so many results. It's like fun anyway, because you're kind of playing these games and, fun to come up with ways to limit yourself and challenge yourself. And, but even more fun, and actually in our games, you don't even have to come up with them yourself. I just found it fun. So that's why I've come up with all these games. But it was also extra fun because you were seeing real results, It was like things were actually happening. Experiments were actually getting done. Evidence and like feedback was actually coming to you. And you just felt alive. I, cannot express that enough. I don't feel as alive as I do when I am in action and really feeling like, yeah, I am living. I'm in the living part of my life, the doing, and not just in the watching or contemplating. Those times are so important too, but I don't know, somehow, for some reason, it seems like people have gotten skewed or just like pulled back too much away from the doing part too. Maybe out of fear, I'm not sure. But certainly out of the playful doing part that's inconsequential. Like when we get in there and start doing, it's always for points, and it's always for life that counts, and it's always, but sometimes it's really important to do the inconsequential stuff too, that's like a game and, going to yield you some results that can then be used in the part that counts of life, but that it's just experimental and it doesn't necessarily have to count for anything big. And it's not like, get up and work and do your day and achieve and be productive, like it's not necessarily that part. It's the doing and the experiencing that's outside of that you can then like take as your training, because I think it's more just like training, and have it count in everyday life. So that is where my brain went when I heard this action ends suffering, because it totally does on all levels, even suffering that we don't necessarily call suffering, just, it ends that I need to grow further, and I'm stuck in a loop, or, stuckness. You could easily say action ends stuckness too. So I want you to try our games if you're not already convinced. Check them out. As always, bringconnectionback.com. But let me know what you think too, especially actually if you're starting to hear things that also support what we do at Bring Connection Back, send them to me. I'm loving how every single week there's something that comes up and it's just perfect. It's like, yes, see that, like that's exactly what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. So